I really believe that the future of teams is going to be humans and agents working together. From a comfort standpoint, we all need to be comfortable. That is how we're going to be approaching problems going forward. You have three compliance managers, two versions of Cora, and they are all the five of them are working together in tandem to achieve a particular outcome. And I believe that comfort level everyone should start having in terms of what those agents look like and how they're going to contribute to your workflow as a business and as a team.
Hi, I'm Boaz, founder and CEO of Augmented AI Labs, and I'm excited that you're tuning in to the Shift AI podcast, a show that explores what it takes to thrive and adapt to the changing workplace in the digital age of remote work and AI. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to welcome Kunal Chopra, the CEO of Certivo. Kunal brings an impressive background spanning multiple leadership roles at tech giants like Microsoft and Amazon, as well as early involvement with Groupon during its explosive growth phase. He also led successful turnarounds as CEO of two mid-market tech companies, one publicly traded and one private equity-backed, before taking on his current role. Certivo, incubated through Pioneer Square Labs in partnership with Fortune 500 manufacturer Fortive, is tackling one of the most challenging yet critical processes for manufacturers worldwide: product compliance. Using AI to transform how companies navigate complex regulatory requirements, Certivo is streamlining workflows that have traditionally been manual, time-consuming, and prone to costly delays. If you are interested in how AI agents are evolving from mere assistants to active team members, how startups can achieve product-market fit more efficiently through strategic partnerships, you won't want to miss this conversation. We also want to send out a special thank you to Augmented AI Labs for sponsoring this episode. This is going to be a great show as we explore the intersection of AI, manufacturing, and the future of work with Kunal. Let's get to it. All right, Kunal, welcome to the Shift AI podcast. It's great to have you.
Same here, Boaz. I'm excited to be here.
Well, before we get started, I just kind of wanted to set up a little bit of your background and context before we start talking about Certivo. So you have spent many, many years in the technology world. You were a GM at Microsoft and at Amazon for many years. You were very early in Groupon, which at one time was one of the fastest growing startups on the planet, was pretty exciting. So you spent a lot of time thinking about SaaS and about the enterprise, and now you're the CEO of Certivo, and we're excited to hear more about what you're doing in the AI space. But did I get most of that right? Was I missing anything in terms of your background and past?
No, I think you got it right. After my stints at Microsoft and Amazon as a general manager, I had two CEO positions at two mid-market tech companies, one publicly traded and one private equity backed. So I had this sort of CEO experience as well in sort of leading some of these companies. And now this is my third CEO venture.
What did you learn about the two companies, one that went public and one that was private equity? Were there differences in the way that you manage those companies, and describe how big they got and where you were leading at the scale of those companies?
Yeah, in Caspian, which was the publicly traded company on the NASDAQ that I was leading, I joined at the time when it was really a turnaround. So the stock price was very depressed. It was $2 a share. The market had pretty much written it off. And, the board of directors was looking for a CEO to come in and help turn around the company significantly, get the company back to profitability, show them a new growth path, lead the team to this new, view of success. And that's what we successfully did. When I left, the share price was around $60 a share. So, certainly returned a lot of the money that the investors put in initially, which was a good run for us. And on the private equity side, very similar in terms of the stage of the company. Was less turnaround at that time, similar size, but more, hey, we need a new direction. This is an old school company. At the time, the company didn't even have, online commerce, for example. They were selling through pen and paper. Literally, orders were coming in through pen and paper. So it was that sort of old school company that needed a little bit of a digital turnaround. And so, I've been in the tech world. I think it was just easy for me, given my Caspian experience, to, help that company as well. So yeah, these were sort of more traditional industries that needed more digitization, sort of a new view of looking at the world, which we successfully did.
I think it's important to state too that, for people listening, that this time around, not only are you the CEO, but you kind of came in partnership with Pioneer Square Labs, PSL. And that's an interesting arrangement that they have because I know they're heavily involved in the early stages of companies, not just giving money, but giving expertise and thinking through some of the problem spaces. So, can you talk a little bit about that? How did you get involved with PSL, with Pioneer Square Labs? What was the process? And describe that to the audience so that we can understand. Was it typical for you in terms of your background in startups, or was this a special way that you guys incubated this company?
Yeah. So, my background also lends itself to the story. So I spent, like you said, all this time at these couple of companies. And once I transitioned out of my previous role, I was looking for, what's next. I took about 6 months off, like typical sort of CEOs do when they transition out. And I was sort of thinking about, what's next. And I knew that, I wanted to really go all in this time into starting my own thing. I'd seen several problems in the manufacturing sector through my time at Amazon, through these two CEO companies, the two CEO gigs that I had as well. So the question for me is, what can I do in that space? Maybe there's some old school industry that needs some digitization. AI is taking over. Is there opportunities for us to be able to apply AI to maybe a more traditional industry, traditional workflows as a whole? And where would those opportunities exist? And then, I've been in touch with PSL over the years. I've known of them just being in the greater Seattle area for the last 18 years. So I met with TA, who's one of the managing directors here, and that's how we connected and sort of talked a lot about ideas in this space and where the future of applied AI really looks like. And the other advantage of PSL, besides the incubation, the studio process that they have, they also have a partnership with a Fortune 500 company called Fortive. And Fortive, being a manufacturing company, is seeing some of the challenges that applied AI could potentially solve. So the partnership really came through the three entities coming together. It was me, it was PSL, and it was Fortive that said, "Hey, Fortive has this problem. PSL knows what it takes to incubate companies. Kunal can bring in the CEO experience, so what it takes to run a company, take it to its next level of evolution." And so that's how it all came together. And that, I believe, is sort of the right match, right? For a company, and we can certainly talk about Certivo, but for a company like Certivo that's trying to sell to the enterprise, getting those early customers is always difficult, especially in the startup phase. And so having the background of PSL to support me, having their process, but more importantly, Fortive as an early adopter and early customer, also has helped sort of give us that initial momentum and to get going. And I think that process really came together very well with PSL.
Can you paint the picture for us? Because it is a really interesting approach to have a problem to solve going in. Probably product market fit happened a lot quicker than it otherwise would have if you were searching for a customer. So how early was Fortive in the room when you guys were working through all of this? And paint the picture for us in terms of what the early ideation was like.
So to give you the process that Fortive also has with PSL as a whole, typically what Fortive does is they'll bring in a bunch of ideas that they think are potentially could become companies to PSL. And every quarter or so, Fortive will do with PSL what they call a sprint week. And essentially the goal of the sprint week is to spend a whole week together and essentially try to launch a startup very, very quickly. And a lot of these ideas get thrown out, a lot of these ideas stay back. And so Fortive had this idea around product compliance, very specifically, that they were facing as an issue in their company that they brought to sprint week. This was, maybe mid of last year or so. And we went through that sprint week process for about a week. And then I joined about a week later. So I was not part of that sprint week, but about a week later, I essentially took that project that came out of sprint week. And as part of sprint week, they discussed that this is probably a viable idea. And like I said, I was in touch with TA from PSL, and I was able to sort of take this idea and run with it. But essentially, Fortive was involved since day one. In fact, a week before
Yeah.
me.
Yeah,
So
that's amazing.
and so since then, we've got a customer that's sitting in the room with us, that is building a product with us, who has connected us to other customers within their network. And so from day one, we had 3 to 5 customers that we've been working with day in and day out to get the product built, get the product launched, and get some early adopters going, get that momentum that's required for a startup to scale.
And so it's a good segue into talking about Certivo. Like, so how much has the idea pivoted since that first startup week when, the week before you got involved? Is it still pretty true to the original idea, or are things shifting around a little bit?
Not much, which has been good, for us so far. So, and again, probably also talks about, the process that we went through, and we ensure that what we are delivering, even as the first MVP, is what customers wanted and needed since day one. What has changed is, one, the brand. It was not called Certivo. It was the out of Sprint Week. It was called Go for Chain. That was the internal project name, and then it transitioned into Certivo eventually. And then the other thing that has changed is features. We're getting a lot of requests for the different types of features. That prioritization process has been changing regularly. So we finally have a product that we believe is, what the market needs right now. And it's gone through a bunch of iterations in terms of prioritization, but the original hypothesis, the concept that we had, hasn't changed majorly since day one. And just, give all the viewers sort of the idea, and, why even my background sort of lent itself well to this, the company is essentially manufacturers face a very big problem. And the problem is that they need to get compliant before they can sell to a particular market. There are tons of government regulations that prevent them from selling to markets. So you might have tons of products that you've built out and you're ready to go to market with, but you can't officially sell in those markets till you have all your regulations on file. Yeah. And those regulations are very hard to get. They're typically time consuming. If you've got to understand the government regulations and how they apply to you, you've got to read through hundreds of docs. You've got to understand, which part is affected. You've got to go and communicate with your supply chain. You've got to collaborate with them. You've got to ask them for documents. You've got to get all this documentation on file, and then you're essentially legally allowed to sell in a particular market. And, this applies globally. This is not a United States thing or a European Union thing. It is just a global problem. So here's a classic case where, hey, can we use applied AI in a way that can help speed up this process, automate parts of this process within the workflow that some of these compliance managers go through, to essentially help products go to market faster? That was the original hypothesis. We're true to that hypothesis. The product has sort of changed, but we're still there within that frame.
So I'm sure there's many, many examples of, letters getting sent and checks, or things needing to get checked off and so on. But what is a typical example of a real hard problem that you're automating that the Gen AI is solving?
So there are various parts of the workflow that, that we are essentially automating through what we call agent, which is called Cora. So we've created an agent that we've called Cora, that stands for Compliance Optimization Regulatory Assistant. Essentially, it's a 24/7 product compliance manager. And there are several parts of this process that Cora is automating. So the first part is it's understanding regulatory changes. So the regulatory changes get published through various PDFs and documents and they come in at different times across the year. There are deadlines that have to be met. And sometimes the government will give you a month, sometimes it will give you a year. So it's changing all the time. So being able to understand that entire analysis of what the government is publishing out there and applying it to your business, where you might have thousands of parts, you might have in thousands of products, each of them might have 10,000 parts, and being able to apply that to your business is very critical. And say, hey, here are the 5 things that you need to do, versus today, there's a product compliance manager sitting and reading those documents, then trying to understand, where it's going to be affected across all my product portfolio. So that's a hard problem that, we are essentially solving to help you, give you all the things that you need to essentially do to get to compliance quickly. The second piece, which is a very hard problem, is the whole collaboration across the supply chain. So for me to be compliant as a product, I need to have every part in my product that I have sourced from suppliers to also be compliant. And which means I have to go down to my supply chain and I've got to ask them for, their certificates, and they've got to send that to me. And so that also is another supply chain collaboration issue. And as much as it sounds like, well, this is just a bunch of emails and phone calls, etc., it's actually a very difficult problem. Why? Because every email that has to go down to the supplier has to be handcrafted by a product compliance manager, who has to go into its ERP system, into their PLM system, has to pull all the data out, has to check which substances, are failing, has to draft that email out. It takes product compliance managers 4 to 5 hours just to draft like an email sometimes to suppliers. We just heard from one of our customers that, they really want to partner with Certivo because someone on their product compliance team essentially did not track all these expiring certifications that needed to be gotten from their supply chain. So they were there, there's no one's tracking this essentially, and we need, some way to be able to manage the tracking, but also the collaboration across the supply chain. So that's the other the issue. We use Gen AI. We can connect with your PLN ERP systems. We can pull all that data. We can track the expiry dates. We can send emails proactively to suppliers automatically. We can follow up with them. We can, personalize those experiences with them. So those are the kind of, problems that we're trying to solve.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I want to kind of hit on a couple of words that you used. I mean, you used the word assistant, used the word agent. And, last year it seemed like it was the year of the assistant. It was the year of the co-pilot. And, we were kind of supercharging humans to get all of this work done easier, faster. They were prompting mostly, writing emails better, faster, moving through this whole process that you just described more fluidly. This year is the year of the agents. And it seems everybody that yet last year had an assistant, this year they have an agent. And it sounds like you do too. And so, but I want to dig into that and kind of understand, where autonomy starts and where assistance ends. Because there's a lot of things that were automatic before when people were, using Zapier and Make and all sorts of different products to automate processes. Now those automations are a little bit more intelligent, like you say. These automations understand when the regulatory system changes, and they can write for you in a way that maybe before automation couldn't. So when you were starting this company, I mean, agent wasn't on the top of everyone's mind, though. How do you think about it now, and how does autonomy play into this whole thing? Is it just important to be able to supercharge the people that are involved in making sure that all this stuff is compliant?
Yeah, and it's a good discussion, right? Because I think the industry tends to give all these different names to automation. Well, there's RPA, there's the, like you said, co-pilot, there's like now the agents that are definitionally, they're supposed to be autonomous in nature, which they aren't fully, let's be honest, and we can talk about that as well. But by and large, the approach at least Certivo has taken is we have identified a use case problem, and we have identified where aspects of this use case automation can apply. And what we've also identified is what is very important, that as part of this use case, that the workflow for the product compliance manager must not change much. And so how do we integrate task automation within the workflow of the product compliance manager? Essentially, what we are doing is we're saying Cora is an assistant to you, not in the form that you and I probably know in terms of like a co-pilot of sorts. It's essentially a person on your team, or it's a agent on your team that is helping you with the tasks that are bogging you down. It's essentially that. Now, parts of that Cora can automate, and parts of that it's going to require some human input. So Cora today is not fully autonomous to go and operate on its own. We can get there, I believe, in the future. I think there's opportunity for us to be able to, for Cora to be smart enough in the future to say, well, I'm going to, I can manage this entire compliance process on my own. But I don't think we're there yet from an industry perspective. But essentially what we have done is we've said, look, there's a workflow. These are parts of the workflow that are very, very manual. Let us give you, a piece of code, very intelligent and smart code. We'll call it Cora. And that code is going to be able to manage all these pieces of the process with you, but it's working with you in tandem. And I also believe that's the future of the team was. I think teams are going to see more of that, where these agents are just going to take tasks that are typically, slow to get done, and they're just going to speed up that process and enable and empower, teams to move faster.
Yeah.
So that's my sort of view of the world.
And now, before we dive deeper, I want to take a quick moment and tell you a little bit about one of our podcast partners. As a listener of this show, I know you're trying to stay on top of all things AI and tech, which is why you have to check out the amazing GeekWire podcast, produced by GeekWire and hosted by Todd Bishop. It's a treasure of insights featuring industry leaders and the latest tech trends that are shaping our world, and the perfect companion podcast to shift AI. GeekWire podcast is where technology meets curiosity and covers the world of technology, startups, and geek culture. Expand your tech horizons and join the conversation. Tune into the GeekWire podcast today, a perfect complement to our own discussions here. Don't miss out. Follow the GeekWire podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or your favorite listening app. Before we go further with the interview, I want to tell you about one of our podcast sponsors, Augmented AI Labs, and how they're transforming businesses through intelligent AI solutions. Augmented AI Labs specializes in helping organizations unlock their potential with Gen AI, starting with your most valuable asset, your business knowledge. Their comprehensive process begins by identifying critical workflow challenges and knowledge needs, then building custom solutions that make your company's expertise instantly accessible. The Augmented AI Labs team combines fine-tuning and retrieval methods to ensure your AI solutions truly understand your business context. They thoroughly test and validate each solution, ensuring it delivers measurable value before creating a detailed technical blueprint for deployment. The real beauty of partnering with Augmented AI Labs is that they don't just stop at strategy. They build, deploy, and manage these solutions for you, continuously improving your knowledge systems while you focus on what you do best. If you're ready to transform how your organization leverages AI and knowledge, visit augmentedAIlabs.com and click on the Contact Us button. That's augmentedAIlabs.com. Now back to the episode. Yeah, it's interesting. We're recording this at the end of January. It's 2 weeks since OpenAI Operator has been out, and everybody in the AI world is watching videos of that working. And so far, what I've seen is a combination of autonomy and an AI on a browser making decisions and moving around a website, but also getting blocked and having to ask a human for a credit card number or having to ask a human for information to be able to move forward. So it is a kind of a dance between humans getting involved and prompting in certain cases, and then the AI going off and automating intelligently. So is that kind of the way you're starting to see the world?
Exactly. And that's exactly how Certivo also is working with Cora. So like in our case, a very simple example would be, product compliance manager comes in every day and Cora has essentially drafted an email for the product compliance manager saying, hey, I need you to approve this email before I can send this to a supplier. Or in cases, Cora might say, we just got this email from a supplier, but I don't recognize the supplier. Can you please make sure that this is really a real supplier or not?
Yep.
I tried to look into our ERP system, but I couldn't find this particular part. Can you confirm that this part is, actually our partner? So it's sort of working with you in tandem. It's doing as much as it can. And it's essentially asking you to prompt it a little further and say, hey, can you give me some more direction? Can you give me some more direction so I can go forward? And so that's how we see the world. Of course, in the future, I imagine a future in the case of Certivo, because it's, multi-node supply chain. I imagine a future where, we can have multiple versions of Cora across the supply chain, and they're smart enough that they can coordinate with each other automatically. And, Cora on supplier and Cora on manufacturer are creating tasks for each other, and they're getting, to a world of compliance pretty much, immediately. We'll get there, I think, over time.
Yeah.
But we're not there for now. For now, I think the human has to be certainly involved, and there's a lot of prompting and sort of working with each other.
Yeah, but it's a path to get to that kind of place.
Right.
What are you hearing from the managers out there, the human managers that are dealing with and testing this stuff out? And then the second kind of follow-up question to that is, if there's a world where there's a lot of managers managing agents, and that's what our jobs look like, describe that to me and how our skill sets as workers are going to need to change to be able to accommodate a world that looks like that.
So I think to answer your first question around what I'm hearing from, just managers as a whole, I think there's cautious optimism. Everyone is excited about this new world where there's, our workflows are going to improve, the things that we don't like to do every day. We're sort of bogged down writing emails for 4 hours to a supplier, or I've got to go and work in my ERP system or my PLM system, and I have to read this 300-page document. Well, there's that's stuff that they don't even want to do on a day-to-day basis. They don't get excited. You don't wake up in the morning saying, I'm going to go read a 300-page doc and then go through my ERP system and figure out, how that applies to my portfolio. So there's optimism that there's a few potentially better future. I think the cautious comes from the fact that, can we trust the AI? Is it doing the right thing? Is it going to hallucinate at times where we don't want it to? Is it going to say that it's compliant when it's not compliant, right? For example, so I think there's some sort of hesitation there that we have to get over. And I think that's going to be an area of as the AIs become better, as the agents become better, and as they work in tandem with the human, and having more approval processes and working with the prompts of the human. I think we'll be in that stage for a period of time where the humans feel very comfortable that, hey, the AI is doing what I want it to do. No different than a new employee on your team that needs some onboarding, some training, etc. And till we get to a stage where I trust this person and they're pretty autonomous. So that's, I think, one direction that we'll certainly see. I think our jobs are going to change, or as managers, dealing with AI as well. And the bogged down stuff that we typically do on a day-to-day basis is probably going to be fully eliminated from our workflows, and we should prepare for a future like that. I also believe that folks are hired to, or should be hired to achieve an outcome as opposed to just do tasks. And so this will help those folks achieve their outcomes a lot better, which is, I think, the positive future that I envision when it comes to the agents. I don't think we're going to get to a stage, at least soon, where, like I said, where they're going to eliminate this job, or we don't need product compliance managers anymore. They're still going to be focused on the strategy, and being able to open up new markets, and what's our strategy to go into the Middle East, and what do I need to get there to get compliant. Well, today Cora can answer those questions for you, but you're still accountable to help us get to the Middle East, for example. So I think that's where we'll probably see whether what the future.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I want you to think back to those times as CEO. I mean, you did a lot of hiring in those years as you were growing those companies, and you're thinking about you know folks that along the way you mentored or that mentored you. I want to hear from you a little bit about how that's going to change in the workforce, as more and more of these agents come into play. How do we teach if these agents are acting as interns essentially, but really, really, really good, fast interns? And hopefully in the future, they will make a lot less mistakes. They're going to be able to kind of deal with these compliance issues across a whole slew of industries, not just manufacturing, right?
Right.
And so, when that happens, how do we get managers to the level necessary to be able to check these AIs when there's not an opportunity for them to learn on the job? How is that going to work?
Yeah, it's a fascinating, problem. And I think it also, we're all learning how this space is going to evolve from a workforce perspective, as this all goes. Because you're right in saying there used to be a time where, for a task that Cora can do today, the obvious answer was, well, we just need to hire more people, or we need to outsource this
Yeah.
task to, some other country, and have them sort of do all these manual work. I think one thing that will certainly change is managers of the future will have to be really AI ready, or need to start becoming a lot more AI ready upfront. I think that's going to be a critical skill set that we'll want to test for. Pretty much everyone, of course, now I'm a startup, I'm early, but pretty much everyone on our team comes with some experience here where they know at least how to use AI. They're comfortable with prompting. They're comfortable being able to use even simple things like ChatGPT, etc., just to do their day-to-day tasks. So I think that's going to be a critical skill set of the future, is being able to learn and understand prompt engineering as a whole, and being able to apply that to your work, because it's going to be a critical piece of your job, irrespective of whatever industry you are in. That's something that I think is certainly going to happen, and it's one thing that we should be testing for, and we'll be looking for. I know, as we hire people into the workforce.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Can you think back of times in your career that you've been influenced by others? Are there mentors in your life that really stand out, that helped you get to where you are today?
Yeah, a lot of them. So my perspective, Boaz, on mentors is, I don't look up to one particular individual and say, well, I want to become, like this person, or this person has been specifically instrumental, to me. There have been certain areas in my life where several people have sort of influenced those areas, both personally as well as professionally. And I also look up to, people when it comes to certain skill sets that they might have, that I want to pull from. It's like, you pull from what are the best from all the folks out there, and you create your own of your own sort of version of who you want to be. That's how I look at the world. Um, but yeah, there've been this so many mentors, in my career who have helped me through the way. TA, of course, here at PSL has been someone who's very instrumental in and who I am. After I transitioned out of my previous role, like I said, I spent a good 6 months at home, sort of figuring out what's next for me. And TA, I know, is very instrumental helping me figure out what that is, and that eventually led to being setting up a company or till today. Outside of him being a board member, and outside of him being an investor in Certivo, he's someone I go to at every point of time for any problems I have. The beautiful part about TA is he's a board member, he's an investor, but he's also a former founder. So you get all these perspectives from him, and he can serve different purposes at every given point of time. But there've been many like these through the years who helped me through career growth, who mentored me, who helped me get jobs, and it's just been hard work, grind, and meeting the right people at the right time.
Yeah, amazing. Well, TA is a great example, and he's been on the show, and every time he comes on, I learn a little something. So that's a great example. Well, I'll flip it around on you a little bit. There's a lot of people that listen to this podcast that are starting companies or trying to start companies,
Yeah.
want to leave their jobs and start a company. So you've been through this now. This is your third rodeo. So what do you tell young founders or first-time founders about the process? What have you learned? Do you have any words of wisdom for them?
Yeah, no, certainly. So it's not easy. First of all, I gotta get that straight out there. It's not easy starting a company. You have to be prepared for several things. The first thing that if you're thinking of starting a company is be prepared for the financial burden that it can take on you. I mean, that's just the honest truth. So you have to be ready to be comfortable without a paycheck for a period of time. I mean, you're the founder, you're the CEO, right? Like, and that comfort is not easy for a lot of people. So, I've been lucky in my career. I've had some good opportunities previously as a CEO. So, I'm lucky enough to be able to, dive in deep and not have, not need the luxury of a paycheck, for example, to be able to get me through, the at least the initial phases of getting funding, etc. And once you're funded, etc., it's a lot better. But that's something that one should be prepared for, because it can get difficult. And what you want as a startup founder is to give all your energy and all your attention to your company. The last thing you want is to be bothered by all these other externalities that might distract you. That's one. Number two, I'd say it's an emotional roller coaster, and you have to be prepared for that. There'll be times when you have a customer win, the next day your customer walks away. The next day you're going to have another win. Your funding might not fall through, and next day you get funded. That ride is going to happen all the time, and you have to find comfort again in that emotional roller coaster. So that's, I think, another piece of advice that people, only when they've gone through it will they realize what it really means. And I think that's number two. And then the third piece, of advice I would give is be ready to move at like a very fast pace. And I think a lot of people, especially coming from bigger companies, they want more process, and there's, they have a certain sort of way of operating. They need some structure. When it comes to an entrepreneurial life, you have to move fast, especially in the initial stages, especially when you're building a venture-backed company that is going to be, unprofitable for a period of time. The only constraint the constraint that you have is you have limited cash in the bank, and that's directly proportional to the amount of time you spend on trying to make movement into your company. So time and being able to move with urgency and speed is something that is very important. That pace you have to also get very comfortable with. I was not initially, but today it's just second nature to me.
Yeah.
But being able to move quickly, I think, is important too.
That's great. Well, I always like to end the show by asking the same question. So you probably know this is coming, but if you were to describe the future of work or workflows in 2 words, what would those 2 words be? And then you can elaborate.
I think the two words would be agent, and I would say team. And what I believe is And the reason I chose those two words is I really believe that the future of teams is going to be humans and agents working together. And I think, again, from a comfort standpoint, we all need to be comfortable that that is how we're going to be approaching problems going forward. And you can imagine, again, you have three compliance managers, in my case, three compliance managers, and two versions of Cora. And they are all, the five of them are working together in tandem to achieve a particular outcome.
Yeah.
And I believe that comfort level everyone should start having in terms of what those agents look like and how they're going to contribute to your workflow as a business and as a team. So I imagine that's going to be the future. I think that's how work is going to evolve. Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a super interesting future. Well, Kunal, I really appreciate you being on the show. I'm excited to see where Certivo goes. This is a use case that I think is really interesting and powerful. And I think there's some momentum here. So I'm excited to keep track, and maybe we'll have you back on next year and we can see where things land.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Boaz. I appreciate you having me on the show, and yeah, very excited to see our progress as well.
Awesome. That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. What a great conversation with Kunal Chopra from Certivo. His journey from leading teams at tech giants to taking on turnaround challenges as a CEO, and now building an AI-powered startup, offers valuable perspective on both traditional business transformation and cutting-edge innovation. I was particularly struck by Kunal's vision of the future workforce as agent and team, where humans and AI agents work together as integrated units to solve complex problems. Kunal's advice for aspiring founders about the financial realities, emotional roller coaster, and necessary pace of startup life offers a candid glimpse into entrepreneurship that goes beyond the glamorized version we often hear. If you're interested in learning more about Certivo and their innovative approach to product compliance through AI, you can find them at certivo.ai. I continue to be amazed by the guests we've had on the show, and I'm excited about the ones joining us in the near future. I truly appreciate you spending your time with us. Thank you for listening to this episode, and don't forget to subscribe to the Shift AI podcast for more exciting interviews and to the Augmented Edge newsletter for updates on how AI can help you scale your business. The Shift AI podcast is syndicated by GeekWire, and we are grateful to have the show sponsored by Augmented AI Labs. Our theme music was created by Dave Angel.